Hey there, it's your host, Mara Glatzel, and you are listening to Even Here, Even Now, a podcast where we are devoted to sharing frank conversations and true stories about what it means to stay by your own side and meet your needs consistently, messily, and sustainably. Now, on to today's show. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Even Here, Even Now with Mara Glatzel. And today we are going kind of all the way back to the beginning of this conversation to talk about what your needs have to do with your life, with staying by your own side, with taking radical self-responsibility, with rebuilding self-trust, with even knowing how to care for yourself to begin with, and to ultimately answer the question of why has my self-care sucked and done so little for me to date, right? I often get people who come to me and they say, well, I've been trying to X, or somebody told me to Y. And very often, these things that they're trying are totally done in good faith. I mean, absolutely done in good faith, but are random things that we are told to do for ourselves when we are burnt out. So one of the hills that maybe the hill that I will die on is that prescriptive self-care is never going to soothe the ache, refill your cup, resource you, delight you, make you feel as if you matter to yourself and as a person on the planet. Prescriptive self-care is the self-care that we are so often sold, right? Here's this list of 10 things to do, or make sure you do this thing that you're seeing all over the place on Instagram. Right now, here we are in March 2026. We are in the lymphatic drainage time. And I actually am a really huge fan of lymphatic drainage. It is a very big part of my personal self-care routine. But that's because my body genuinely needs it. And we see these sorts of things come across our feeds quite literally. And it's like, that's the thing you need. You should be wearing a weighted vest while you walk in the woods. I happen to also really love that thing. I'm a sucker for self-care. But what I think is really important is that we don't just throw some of this prescriptive self-care at ourselves and say to our bodies, like, what's your deal? Why aren't you happy yet? Why aren't you well-resourced? Why aren't you less burnt out? What's wrong with you? So there's a few things that are wrong with this concept. I'm going to address those things first. Then we're going to talk about what needs have to do with all of this. So first things first, many of us have been burnt out for quite some time. I do this work with humans all over the planet for the last 15 years in my private practice and online and courses. I wrote a book, as many of you know, called Needy. And so I have been having these conversations with people for many, many years. And in 2020, when COVID hit, right about now, I'm recording this on March 12th. So right about now, 6 years ago, what I noticed was an increase in chronic stress and in burnout that has not ceased since then. So that was a tipping point. And since then, more people than not are burnt out. More people than not are overwhelmed. There is quite simply far too much for us to hold as individuals on a daily basis. From what's happening globally to what's happening here in the States, to doing all of the many things that we are doing, toggling back and forth between the macro and the micro and taking care of all of the things that need to be taken care of while also being a human in a body, while also being responsible for caring parents, caring for aging parents, or caring for young children, or trying to, have a relationship in this time, to demands at work that may not be things that a real live human could attend to, right? To things that we want to do to show up in our community, our activism, our volunteer efforts, becoming more politically active. There's a lot on the table. And so when you take one little act, one little bath, one little mental health walk, and you offer it to yourself, and you expect that one thing to alleviate all of your suffering, that's a tall order for one bath. And it is little surprise that you end that bath, or you end that walk, or you end that thing feeling perhaps even more exhausted than you did to begin with, right? You let your guard down, you softened for just a second, and all that did was remind you of how much stress you are carrying. So not only did it maybe not alleviate the suffering, but it also illuminated the suffering, and who has time for that? So I get who has time for that people at my doorstep all the time, which I completely understand. And as I said before, when the bath's not the thing that you personally need, it's just a thing that you thought to try that you plucked off a list because what else are you going to do? It's just that much more ineffective, right? Because it's random. It is not bespoke and specific unto you. So the big idea here is that if we want to have vibrant, full, fabulous, true, real, well-nourished lives, which I do, if we want to show up for the things that matter to us sustainably, consistently-ish, to the best of our abilities, and with as much presence and embodiment as possible, we have got to think about our needs. Our needs are not some random peripheral concept, which I'll get to that when it's more convenient or easier, which it will never be. Our needs are central to absolutely every part of our life, to absolutely everything that we want to do with our lives. And so it's really important that we start to generate a deeper relationship with ourselves, a deeper understanding of ourselves in context. And this takes some awareness, it takes some skills. And we'll get into that in a minute. But what I want you to hear me say is that you cannot advocate for what you can't identify. You can't hold your ground if you don't know what ground you're standing on. You can't say, this doesn't work for me, if you don't have a full understanding and the self-trust to back it up for what does work for you. And so if you're not in touch with your needs, truly in touch with your needs, then you're operating in your life with very little information about what better would look and feel like. So I often have these conversations that start I don't know. I just don't want to feel like this anymore. I just don't want to feel so small in my life. I don't want to feel like a robot taking care of everybody else all the time. I don't want to feel like I'm the last one on my list. I'm waiting for somebody to notice how hard that I'm working. I'm waiting for an easier time, a blank space in my calendar, or a big break or vacation to be able to figure all of this out because I'm so overwhelmed. And what we're taught is, you feel that way, start checking off the list, the prescriptive self-care. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? What about this? And it's not that there's not some good ideas in there. I've already fessed up to loving a whole bunch of these very cliche self-care things. Personally, they're good, they're great. But the reason that they work for me is not because they're great, but because they are specifically geared towards something that I need in particular. I am a person who had very congested lymph for much of my life. I have some connective tissue stuff going on. I had some deep chronic inflammation stuff going on from an injury. I had a major surgery on my right ankle a couple of years ago that damaged the lymph and the lymphatic drainage in that leg. The reason that I focus on lymphatic drainage for my body in particular is because there are site-specific things for my physiological form that activity supports. The reason why I love to be stomping around in the woods with my weighted vest on is because wearing that weighted vest, doing that kind of heavy work was one of the first things in my life that enabled me to cram all of my big, wild energy back into my body, to feel contained, to hit that dopamine, to be able to regulate myself emotionally so that I could show up far more contained, far more regulated for the rest of my day. So I don't just like these things because they show up in my feed. I like these things because they are specific solutions to creating a greater sense of ease and strength and containment and emotional regulation and emotional maturity and ease inside of my body. I want that, right? These aren't the only two things that I do that give me that feeling. There are other things that give me that feeling as well. And those are the things that I prioritize because I have to live inside of myself. And that means I can't afford personally to be carrying all of this chronic stress, even though, yeah, there's a lot to be stressed out about. But I, as a person, have so much to show up for. And if I'm not in good working order, absolutely everything, all of my commitments, all of the things that I value, all of the change that I want to make in the world around me is in jeopardy because I am not well cared for. So when I say that knowing what you need and staying by your own side, taking care of yourself, being the tender steward of your life, responsively caring for your body has to do with your needs is because they are intricately interwoven. Now, what's a real live human to do? Because for many of us, our needs are these really nebulous concepts. We were not raised to have a vocabulary or a skill set for identifying, honoring, and advocating for our needs. We did not grow up with role models. That's quite literally the reason that I started this podcast is because my clients kept saying to me, you know, and this was almost a decade ago. So this is a different time now. But in that time, my clients were saying to me, you're the only person who I know who is positively, even neutrally speaking about what it means to have needs. And having these conversations out loud or inviting guests on, it's been a while since we had a guest, but we're going to have some coming up, really enabled us together as a community to start developing the language around what we are even allowed to need, what is even on the table to need. And the value in hearing other people talk about, hey, this is how I figure it out. This is how I navigate these conversations. This is how I'm making it work. And I want to tell you that so many people who I've interviewed here before we get on live say to me, I don't know why you had me on this podcast because I am not good at meeting my needs. This is still a total work in progress for me. I'm not an expert, which is great, right? We are not perfect robot experts here. We are human beings reporting live from the journey of staying by our own side, tending to our needs, showing up for ourselves in meaningful and doable ways in a world that does not value this kind of care, that wants what it can extract from you. And so it wants you in good working order so that you can do all the things and bop, 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 everybody else can benefit, but doesn't actually care how you are doing. And I care how you are doing, dear listener. I care how I'm doing. This body is the vessel that I have for this life. And there's a lot of things I want to do with my life. And I want to be here for a long time. And I want to parent my sweet girls for a long time. And I want to be a problem solver and a support system in my community for a long time. Like, I want to live my life from this site, from this body. And so taking care of myself is of absolute vital importance. Now, what does this really look like? Like, what are the moves? If I'm sitting here thinking like, sounds great, Mara, but what and where do I start? I do want to say that this is what all of my work is about. And if you are desiring a greater level of support, this is what I'm here to help you with. This is what was put on this planet to do. But I'm going to give you some starting points here. And, I really think about this in like a 3-prong process. And, if you show up in my signature course 10, this is what I teach you to do over the course of 12 weeks together. The first is we have to develop the skill of attunement to self. We have to slow down enough to notice how we are doing physically, emotionally, mentally. We have to develop the skills for checking in with ourselves and really collecting the data, right? I said site specific, reporting live from this body. We have to be able to be unfettered reporters of our internal experience to ourselves, because that's the data that's going to guide the entire operation. Now, this is so challenging because many of us don't have the tools for this, and also working against us are any lived stories, any personal experiences, any cultural narratives and conditioning that tells us that having needs, being a feeling human with requirements for wellness is a bad thing. We're going to get to that in a minute. So talking about this education piece, I am so inspired. I've been teaching about needs for a long time. But over the last couple of years, I have been so inspired. I have a 6 and a 9-year-old for how they are being taught from such an early age in an age appropriate way to identify their feelings, to locate themselves based on the behavior that they're exhibiting, so they can really have an understanding like, oh, wow, I'm really frustrated. And when I'm really frustrated, I need this thing. How they're being taught to identify, when this happens, I feel this way. And when I feel this way, I need this thing. And over the last couple of years, what I've realized with my clients is that we don't even have the most basic structures for this kind of communication. And so what I like to do, I love to do some inner child work, some inner teen work. Where I always begin is going back to these, a feelings chart that has 6 faces on it: happy, sad, surprised, frustrated, right? Building the tools from the beginning so that your inner kid, the version of you who did not have this information, the version of you that nobody was available to teach because they didn't have this information, developing your understanding of your needs by going back to the beginning and giving those youngest parts of you some tools so that you can scaffold it out. So eventually, we're talking about adult things and adult needs and adult nuance and perspective, but it's built on this foundation that really has us understanding our feelings, our habits, our patterns, our attachment needs, our base needs for how we feel seen, known, heard, safe in relationship, to our higher level, more adult needs. Because if we don't have that foundation, we always have this felt sense of embarrassment and shame, like I missed something that everyone else got. Right? Everyone else knows how to do this innately. It's just me. And it's not just you. This is why I love to teach in groups. I do this work one-on-one with people all the time, but I find that doing this work in good company is the best part of the experience for people, because we get to look around this virtual circle and say, hey, me too. You too? Okay, maybe it's a little different. but I can understand myself in context as I am hearing other people share, as I'm hearing other people learning how to report from their bodies, to share that data of this is how I am, this is how I'm doing, this is what I need. So that's the first piece. Noticing, building that skill for attunement, for caring for yourself. And here's the most important part about this is I guarantee you already know how to do this. I guarantee that you are giving care to other people. I guarantee that you have a skill set for attuning to others and their feelings and their needs with empathy and with care and with like discipline. This is a transferable skill. If you know how to care for anyone or anything, you can learn how to care for yourself. And how fabulous is it to know you're not actually starting from zero, because you are actually already equipped with a lot of the tools that you need to be able to attune to yourself. All right, now back to that unlearning piece. The second move we need to make is to build our trust that our needs are legitimate and that each and every one of us is an accurate reporter of our own internal and external experience. Now, this requires unlearning old stories, unearthing older experiences, divesting from cultural conditioning around who and what we are expected to be. I've noticed over the last couple of months, I have a 9-year-old, as I said, and what I've noticed over the last couple of months is that the girls in her class, a lot of people, parents and the, caregivers and the like, are talking about them saying things like, they're so dramatic, right? They're so dramatic. And simultaneously, I'm working with so many adults who are asking me, is this really what I need, or am I just being dramatic, right? We learn at such an early age that we are making too much of something. God forbid you are a thinking, feeling, sentient being on this planet who has thoughts and feelings and is responding, dare I say, appropriately to the world around us, right? God forbid. So when we are labeled dramatic, when we are made to feel as though our needs are a burden, when we are taught to mistrust our bodies, right? Hello, diet culture, diet industry. When we are taught to mistrust our hungers, it is little wonder that we have a lack of trust in ourselves, in our needs, in our bodies, in our innate ability to report from the field, from the site of our bodies about what we are thinking and feeling and experiencing and needing. And in order to repair this connection with ourselves, we have got to give voice to, divest from, pull from the root some of these concepts that we were taught about what it means to be a person in a body. We need to learn that we live in a world under an overculture that very specifically conditions us, very specifically dehumanizes us, very specifically extracts and exploits us for profit or gain. And if we want to reclaim our humanity, and I do, I want that for me, and I want that for you, and I want that for all of us. If we want to do that, we have got to learn how to rebuild this trust, to stop waiting for external approval, to stop looking for external validation, to put ourselves upon the pedestal in our own lives and trust that we know what we want and need, that we're allowed to make choices based on that data. And even if that choice ends up being a mistake here, guess what? You're allowed to make mistakes. Expecting yourself to be perfect all of the time and always know what to do and always have the right answer. Hello, oldest sisters amongst us, calling to you. That is not a fair expectation. It's not a fair expectation for me to have of myself, and it's not a fair expectation for you to have of yourself either. All right, so the third move is staying by your own side, advocating for yourself, holding your own hand even when everything in you wants to self-abandon. Now, by self-abandon, I mean ghosting yourself in the face of someone or something that feels bigger and more powerful than you. In my own personal practice, I mean my relationship with myself, I refer to this as pancaking out. Pancaking out is a cute thing that I did for many, many years, which is to just flop, make myself super flat and like pressed against the wall. Nothing to see here. No feelings, no, nothing. As making myself as small and easy to deal with as possible. And, I learned to pancake out when I was a kid. I pancaked out for much of my life. And this is a form of self-abandonment. Nothing to see here. No feelings, no needs. I'm okay. I'll be fine. I'm always fine. Nothing wrong with me. How about you? What do you need? Right? And learning how to stay by your own side requires that data, requires that trust, requires like a dash of tenacity, but it also requires skill. Like quite literally, what do you say to someone else when something happens? How do you talk about it? How do you ask for what you need? What do you do when they say no? Because they're gonna say no. How can you show up for yourself when you feel excruciatingly uncomfortable? Because I can assure you that learning how to stay by your own side, reconfiguring your life so that your needs are at the center of it is uncomfortable business, but that doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. It doesn't mean you should wait until you get more data or listen to more podcasts or read more books or take more classes, right? It's gonna be uncomfortable. This is why one of the first things that I do intend is help my clients build a discomfort menu. It's like, these are all of the things available to me when I'm uncomfortable. I don't have to pancake out. I don't have to backtrack and say like, just kidding, nothing to see here, no problem, forget I ever said that. I can learn how to tend to and soothe my discomfort without diminishing myself, without making myself tiny and small and nothing to see here, without self-abandonment. But this is skill building. This is, and I'm going to say vital skill building for being a human being on the planet right now. What is required to be in relationship in 2026? What is required to be an active participant in your community, which is very important, is the ability to understand your own capacity, to understand your own needs, to understand where you can say yes and where you're going to need to say no, and how this all works out, and being honest with other people and actually saying the words out loud. These are skills that we have got to build in order to be effective, present human beings in our worlds right now. And I know for so many of my people, it's like, I will do anything to never have an awkward or messy conversation. I will do anything to not be caught in the act of doing something new. Like, oh gosh, I cringe personally because it is so uncomfortable being a beginner. And I fully understand that in order to step into this radical self-responsibility, in order to step into being a steward of your needs, there's a lot of messy, new things that you're learning on the fly, that you're experimenting with in person. You're gonna get it wrong. And there's no way. It's like, if you've read the book, the children's book, Going on a Bear Hunt, it's like, you can't go under it. You can't go over it. You've got to go through it. Squelch, 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 squelch. That's you going through the muck. Squelch, squelch, squelch. And this is why it's so important for us to do this work in good company with one another. This is why this podcast exists, to be in good company with you. And I'm going to get better about podcasting. I'm back on my podcasting game. I can't say for how long, but for now I am back and I am here. And, this is also why I run communities and programs so that we can do this work alongside one another, so that you can receive my support in doing this work, because it does get uncomfortable. It does get messy. And none of that means that you shouldn't need what you need, that you shouldn't ask for what you asked for, or that you are wrong in wanting to bring more of the full expansion of your humanity to every part of your life. I will be here cheering you on as you bring every ounce of your truest self forward. I really believe that's our birthright. I really believe the world, our relationships, our communities, our children are better for it. And that's why I'm here. And I'm so glad that you're here. And thank you for hanging out with me today. I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to Even Here, Even Now with Mara Glatzel. If you want my support in learning to stay by your own side and nourish your needs, dance on over to maraglatzel.com/quiz to take my quiz to figure out what you need right now and receive my best tools for how to meet those needs with a greater sense of ease and confidence. If you love today's show, please leave us a rating or review wherever you subscribe to this podcast. It helps more than you know. And as always, permission loves company. If there's a human in your life that you think can benefit from this conversation, I would be so grateful if you shared it with them. Thank you. See you next time.